I'm here with Professor Thierry Le Chevalier, Section Co-Editor for European Perspectives, the new initiative of the Oncologist European Edition, and newly appointed President of the Institut d'Oncologie Thoracique in France. Thierry, despite much work by dedicated people, including yourself, lung cancer remains a major killer worldwide in 2012. How do we address this serious public health problem?
I think that we have two major issues. The first is prevention, and we know that the tobacco habits and the smoking issues remains the major cause of lung cancers. And even if several countries have battled and tried to decrease the amount of smoking habits, it remains a major issue, particularly in Europe. And the other is the number and the quality of what we will call the minimal guidelines. We don't offer to each patient in Europe what is considered to be minimal guidelines that offers the best chance of cure or the best chance of a relevant survival prolongation.
And Thierry, with that second point, how do we try and address this issue in relation to trying to ensure that every European patient gets treated the same?
That's what we are working about, particularly with ECC and other activities that try to improve this level of treatment of each single patient, and not a global overview of the number of patients treated. We have surgery, we have minimal radiation quality and techniques, we have some drugs that have a relevant activity, and we have to be sure that all patients in Europe get these treatments.
Why do you think that many of the drugs that we've tried or the approaches that we've tried have met with so little success over the last 30 to 40 years?
I think that lung cancer has several issues. The first is age. The median age for lung cancer is 69 years, so about half the population of lung cancer has 70 and more, which limits the possibilities of treatment. You have a lot of comorbidities in this disease, mostly due to smoking and other habits. You have the social issue of smoking, and you know that it's not easy to say we stop. It's forbidden. It's much more than difficult, and everywhere we have this problem of the limitation of smoking habits. We have a poor prognosis, which is not attractive for most pharmaceutical companies because the exposure of the patient to the treatment is short. So compared to several other malignancies, it's not the most attractive disease. And finally, we have some technical issues with those treatments that might provide a real improvement. When I speak about surgery, a simple lobectomy is pretty easy, but a complex treatment with reimplantation, with the most sophisticated techniques of surgery is rare, and we are missing a lot of thoracic surgeons to do that. And that's the main issue, to improve the amount of cured patients.
Absolutely. As with many cancers, a better understanding of the biology of the malignancy can help to identify new or novel targets. Do you think we know enough about lung cancer to identify new targets and also translate them for clinical benefit in lung cancer patients?
So there is an incredible improvement that we have observed in the last years, very few recent years. If we look at squamous cell carcinoma that were considered to have no targets, now we have about a fifth of patients with very well established target with mutations, etc., etc. Unfortunately, we still have no active treatments for these targets, but you know that as soon as you have identified a target, the pharmaceutical companies and others are here to develop a treatment against this target. In adenocarcinomas, when we look at the North American consortium and even in our own experience in my institute, a good half of patients have a target. And at the moment, about 20% of those patients with adenocarcinomas have a treatment which is precisely targeted against this. So the benefit is here. What is maybe missing, and we will have the opportunity to speak about that, is that when we just have the treatment for the target, the duration of the treatment is limited, and that's a major issue.
One of the targets you're obviously referring to is the epidermal growth factor receptor. We've seen that innovative drugs like gefitinib and erlotinib have been developed against this target and have been successful and been effective in the subgroup of patients who have EGFR mutations. However, it seems now that after initial promise, both of these tyrosine kinase inhibitors may not benefit the majority of lung cancer patients. Do you agree with this opinion?
Yes and no. Yes, because that's true that only a minority, particularly in our Western countries, minority of patients have a mutation, an EGFR mutation, and an activating mutation. Now, it's a number of patients, and these patients have a different profile of disease compared to those who have no EGFR mutations. What we are maybe missing is how to deal with these mutations. We have these two drugs that you have cited, erlotinib and gefitinib. Once the patient develops resistance or where they are primary resistance, we don't know very well how to deal with them. And the duration of response, even if it is years, is always frustrating when you see a dramatic response and a resistance appearing. Is just a poor story for the patient, etc., etc. We are working on that. We have some new drugs which offer a large hope for in case of resistance, etc. And I think that we have still to work a lot on that. And EGFR pathway remains a very, very, very promising pathway for treatments.
Referring to the problem in relation to resistance and potential new drugs, obviously we've had the recent phase 3 clinical trial using an irreversible inhibitor of the ERB receptor pathway, afatinib. And this is shown in patients with non-small cell lung cancer who have the EGFR mutation, some certainly very impressive results. What do you think is the future for this type of therapy in relation to patients with lung cancer?
I think that it's typically what we have to work on. If you look at these drugs quickly, you think, okay, it's a me too. It's something like a better gefitinib, a better erlotinib. In fact, these drugs are very sophisticated, and I think that they are using the best way to do. When you have a patient with an EGFR mutation, you have to keep the patient for a long time. You cannot accept only 6 months or 1 year of benefit. You have to keep these patients alive, as we do with breast in case of HER2 positive breast, when you can push the duration of survival for years and years and years. We have to work on that, but I think that afatinib is a very good example of what we can do to improve the outcome of these patients.
And what other targets, you mentioned obviously other targets in the EGFR pathway, but what other targets do you think have a potential at least to make a significant difference in our fight against lung cancer?
So as you know, we have ALK today, and the treatment of ALK rearrangements, which is the crizotinib. We will probably have many other pathways tomorrow, very early, like FGF and many others. we miss targets, even if now we know that we have at least 50% of targets, of potential targets in adenocarcinomas. And I think that we will see these targeted treatments very well developed in the next 3 to 5 years.
And with these targeted treatments, do you think we need to look at new models in relation to clinical trials involving targeted therapy? Do you think we have it right at the moment?
Definitely, yes. I would say that maybe the main problem is the leadership of pharmaceutical companies on the control of the disease itself. The pharmaceutical companies have done an incredible work in the last 20 years, but the academy was not there. And we have just followed what they were giving. They give the drug, they say, okay, this is the indication we obtained from FDA, from the EMA, and the doctors just give the treatment as it is. They are following. They should be at least partners at the highest level, or even try to push the companies to develop. And I think that it's a major pitfall of the academic institutions, which have a lot of ideas, not to have pushed the use and developed new concepts of treatments. If we take the example of EGFR inhibitors or of crizotinib, we see that they are given at the late stage of the disease when the war is lost. We win a battle, but we lose the war. And we lose the war in few months or few years. And this is just not acceptable. We need to have those who are winning the war. And for that, we have probably to use this drug a bit differently. So we have the power of the agencies, but the academy has to be here also to create new concepts of treatment with the use of these drugs.
That's a very important point. And just recently, for this journal, we did an interview with Bill Hite, and he feels exactly the same from Johnson & Johnson, that really we need to look at academic industry partnerships as the way forward, and that we still concentrate on the fundamental science and then work in partnership with the industry to bring that into new drugs. Thierry, you've just recently been elected founding president of the Institut d'Oncologie Thoracique. What are your hopes and aspirations for this new and exciting initiative?
No, that's exactly where, exactly your previous comment. That I think that to treat a patient and to look at a disease like lung cancer, we need to have an academic overview of the disease from A to Z, from prevention and early diagnosis to the late stage treatments. And this is the only way to include the treatments, all the treatment that we have, not only the drugs, not only the surgery, not only sophisticated stereotactic and other radiations, but all the treatment, the enormous armamentarium that we have, to include them at the right moment. And for that, you need to have a view of the patient all along the disease. What about a surgery that would be offered in a late stage? That's stupid. Nobody will. But maybe giving a drug at the late stage is as stupid as offering surgery at the late stage. And for that, we have to have the patient from A to Z. The best example of a recent approach like that was AIDS. AIDS has been initially treated in some infectious disease divisions, etc., etc. Once it has been considered as a whole disease, with a prevention, with a treatment, it has been, let's say, controlled. And that's because the disease has been taken out of the system and just observed from the beginning to the end by itself, knowing when you had to give the antiviral treatment, etc., etc., how many drugs to give. That's a total control of the disease. If you leave lung cancer in as poor patients in a pulmonology division, as just patients for a phase 1 study in a cancer center, etc., you cannot control the whole disease. You need to have an overview. And my institute has just been done for that, to have the whole cohort from the beginning to the end of the disease. And I strongly hope that with that, we will be able to develop new strategies.
That sounds like an excellent overarching blueprint, and I certainly wish you all the success in that.
Thank
you
you
very much, Thierry.
Thank you so much.
Okay.